we are in such a moment in time when leadership needs to be redefined. We need to be thinking about how we lead, what is actually a leader, the leaders that we look up to, what standards are we holding them to? So, before we dive in, introduce yourself and tell us about your leadership journey.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. I'm definitely on a mission to help emerging leaders rethink about leadership and how they show up within it. I've been a leadership coach now for 13 years,
Hmm.
working one on one with corporate organizations and larger groups. I'm a mother of two, been married for 17 years. And throughout my whole leadership journey, it really started by me being an immigrant girl coming to the United States and learning how to lead myself when I didn't have the best people around me to look up to teach me, the virtues in life, to make the best
Hmm.
decisions. And I had to rely on myself to do that. And the coaching experience really opened up my eyes on how I can become a better person. And I learned through my life experience that leadership isn't a job role. It's not something you step into just in the corporate world, but it's who you show up as on a day to day basis. Leadership is who you are at the end of the day.
Thank you for that. Can you tell us what was the impetus for you becoming a leadership coach from your previous role? And how do you think life leadership propels the leadership conversation? How did you come up with the concept?
Where I fell into coaching because I wanted to heal myself. And through that process, I kept adding more core values into my repertoire. And I began to lead from that perspective versus having this prominent role in a financial institution at 17 years old. That wasn't my identity. It was the values that I brought to the table on a day to day basis that dictated where I was and what rooms I walked into. And I think that is really truly what has changed my perspective about leadership. And I've also seen it when people really buy into the job role that they're in. And life gives us so many different variables that we can't control, right? Like we lose jobs, lose job roles, we lose being in a certain industry that we love. Our kids grow up and move out, relationships end. And if
Mm-hmm.
we're so tied to those things with our identity and not these values that we can own for ourselves, that's when life feels like it's happening to you versus you being an active participant in it. And that's truly how it developed. And obviously, coaching people for the last 13 years, I've seen the good of what it is when people really do have a value that they actively use in their life versus having leadership being something that they step into and they hang up the hat at the end of the day.
I love what you're saying about your background and how you came into this work, into leadership. And even as an immigrant, like not being necessarily handed the tools of like how to succeed in corporate, what it means to be a leader. I hear you saying that there are a lot of social programming around what a leader should be and how a leader should behave. And also what makes you a leader, right? Your title, your job role, your quote unquote corporate power versus kind of an internal knowing and internal compass that it seems you were able to tap into pretty early. And so that kind of developed, it sounds over time, into you also making some life transitions as well. Tell us then, as we dive a little deeper here, what is life leadership and how can we start to tap into it?
We all have values that we show up in the world with, and sometimes we just don't realize or know what to call them. If
Mhm.
leadership is, again, just having the awareness that leadership can happen or be for anyone. You could be the janitor and you could be the CEO or a board member. Everybody has the capacity to be a leader, and you're always leading whether you like it or not. So, do you want to
Mm.
lead with integrity and with your North Star, or just be the leader that everybody wants you to be? And through my experience in life and in coaching, I've noticed that a lot of leaders, especially in corporate settings, they have this underlying anxiety of always feeling like they're on, but they're not always feeling whole and complete. Even though the external measures of leadership is telling them that they're doing a great job, the OKRs are on point, the KPIs are great, you're getting the funding, but there's this underlying feeling of dissatisfaction. And it's because they're leaving themselves out of the process. They're showing up in different rooms completely different
Mhm.
because they're performing for someone who is obviously looking at them for answers. But if you really start to think of leadership as your value, your core individual value, you show up steady in every single room. So for me, it's being the same leader in all different rooms, whether you're at home with your spouse, with your children, in your corporate setting, with your one on one relationships. More
Mhm.
importantly, how are you being a leader to yourself?
I think about leadership similar to you from the perspective of leading yourself, obviously for the results you want and how you want to be in the world. And then we talk about how you engage with people and influence them, which I hear you saying you're a leader whether you want to be or not, because you have to take charge of something. If you're living by default, that's the only way you'll not be a leader. Someone will just be telling you what to do and then you'll execute it. And someone else is
Yeah.
pulling the strings. But if at any time in life you are taking the reins and going from a default living to trying to define and decide how you want your life to be, then you're automatically a leader because you're first leading yourself. I think the problem comes into play when the way you lead yourself and the way you think about yourself doesn't translate into how you lead others, how you show up in an organization, how you show up at home, in your relationships. I think relationships is a space where leadership gets to show up and gets to thrive. From your perspective, why is it difficult for folks aligned with this way of thinking about leadership to have an aligned identity across different areas of life so they feel whole and don't feel as disconnected? Because also, I think this is where burnout comes into play, right? When you're not leading self in different areas, but you compartmentalize or you cherry pick the parts of you that are okay here, but not okay there. And then you're wearing a mask. That causes a level of disconnection from self, a level of disorientation about who you really are. And from talking to leaders and working with leaders myself, that leads to a sense of, I don't know who I am, imposter syndrome popping in, or inconsistency in how you show up. And then trust breaks down with the team or your own leadership. And then it becomes very modeled and very messy quickly. But I think the path to actually realigning is not that clear and not that simple for folks. So, how do you think about that? Or how do you advise your clients when they're going through that, when they're trying to find the internal alignment that they have with themselves, how they're trying to bring that forward and drive results with people, with teams, with partners, etc.?
It really starts with